Hello, welcome back. We are in Deuteronomy 7. We're going to cover Deuteronomy 7 and 8 today. They're fairly short chapters, and so I think we'll be able to make some pretty good progress with both of them today. So I'm going to read from the New Living Translation. There's not a whole lot of difference, and it's a little bit easier to hear and read. So we'll jump right in. Deuteronomy chapter 7. And again, if this is your first video, please go back because some of that foundational stuff will make all of this make sense. And share it with your friends, family, enemies, and the guy at the donut place. If you buy donuts, then tell him about it too. So, when the Lord your God brings you into the land you are about to enter and occupy, he will clear away many nations ahead of you: the Hittites, Girgashites, Amorites, Canaanites, Perizzites, Hittites, and Jebusites. These 7 nations are greater and more numerous than you. When the Lord your God hands these nations over to you, you are to conquer them. You must completely destroy them, make no treaties with them, and show no mercy. This is one of the reasons people don't like the God of the Old Testament, because they think the new God is not mean and is all about love and mercy. But God's really not. When he says something, he's very serious about it. So you must not intermarry with them. Do not let your daughters and sons marry their sons and daughters, for they will lead your children away from me to worship other gods. Then the anger of the Lord will burn against you, and he will quickly destroy you. This is what you must do. You must break down their pagan altars and shatter their sacred pillars, cut down their Asherah poles and burn their idols. For you are a holy people who belong to the Lord your God. Of all the people on the earth, the Lord your God has chosen you to be his own special treasure. The Lord did not set his heart on you and choose you because you were more numerous than other nations, for you were the smallest of all nations. That's the other thing. He picked the slave group of small people. He didn't pick the biggest, greatest one. He picked the smallest one almost. So rather, it was simply that the Lord loves you and he was keeping the oath he had sworn to your ancestors. That is why the Lord rescued you with such strong hand from your slavery and from your oppressive hand of Pharaoh, king of Egypt. Understand, therefore, that the Lord your God is indeed God. He is the faithful God who keeps his covenant for 1,000 generations and lavishes his unfailing love on those who love him and obey his commands. If they what? Obey his commands. But he does not hesitate to punish and destroy those who reject him. Therefore, you must obey all these commands, decrees, and regulations I'm giving you today. Nowhere in the Bible does it say you don't have to do that anymore. It says do this because then you'll be blessed. Not going to heaven or not going to heaven, but so you'll be blessed here. So if you listen to these regulations and faithfully obey them, the Lord your God will keep his covenant of unfailing love with you, as he promised with an oath to your ancestors. He will love you and bless you, and he will give you many children. He will give fertility to your land and your animals. When you arrive in the land he swore to give your ancestors, you will have large harvests of grain, new wine, and olive oil, and great herds of cattle, sheep, and goats. You will be blessed above all the nations of the earth. None of your men or women will be childless, and all your livestock will bear young. And the Lord will protect you from all sickness. He will not let you suffer from the terrible diseases you knew in Egypt, but he will inflict them on all your enemies. You must destroy all the nations the Lord your God hands over to you. Show them no mercy, and do not worship their gods, or they will trap you. Perhaps you will think to yourself, how can we ever conquer these nations that are so much more powerful than we are? And this isn't an opinion, God said it too. But don't be afraid of them. Just remember that the Lord your God did to Pharaoh and to all the land of Egypt. Remember the great terrors the Lord your God sent against them. You saw it all with your own eyes, and remember the miraculous signs and wonders and the strong hand and powerful arm with which he brought you out of Egypt. The Lord your God will use the same power against all the people you fear. And the Lord your God will send terror to drive out the few survivors still hiding from you. No, do not be afraid of those nations, for the Lord your God is among you, and he is a great and awesome God. The Lord your God will drive those nations out ahead of you little by little. You will not clear them away all at once. Otherwise, the wild animals would multiply too quickly for you. But the Lord your God will hand them over to you. He will throw them into complete confusion until they are destroyed. He will put their kings in your power, and you will erase their names from the face of the earth. No one will be able to stand against you, and you will destroy them all. That's a pretty clear statement there. I can't let it all happen at once because you wouldn't be able to handle it. But if you do all of these things, no one will stand against you, and you'll conquer them all. So you must burn their idols in fire, and you must not covet the silver or gold that comes from them. You must not take it, or it will become a trap to you, for it is detestable to the Lord your God. Do not bring any detestable objects into your home, for then you will be destroyed, just like them. You must utterly detest such things, for they are set apart for destruction. So, because Jehovah is the God of everything, he has the authority to make the choices he makes. That's why. We can look at it, well, that's not fair and that's not nice, but he's God. He gets to make the choices he makes. So this means that we have to be careful when we define who God is and assign him characteristics he doesn't have, or take away from characteristics that we'd prefer he not have. And that's the problem with saying, well, the God of the old one, my God is all about love and mercy and hugs. And the God of the Old Testament was this. Well, we're assigning characteristics that aren't real, and we're taking away the ones we don't get to create a God, because that's idolatry. So making a God who winks at sin, or a God who loves and accepts everyone and places that love above his laws and commands, or as a God who disciplines everybody except Christians, that's idolatry. We're assigning attributes to God that he didn't have. Someone told me yesterday, well, everybody's equal in God's eyes. I'm like, no, they're not. He says right there, they're not. He treats his followers different than non-followers. So everybody's not equal in his eyes. Jehovah is the permanent owner of the land of Canaan too. So therefore, Israel has no right to give any of that land to someone else, much less a foreigner. So we saw this in the laws of Jubilee, where land has to be returned to the original owner. Now, this law only applies to the Holy Land, so don't get all worried about you losing your house or whatever it is. When Israel was exiled, the Lord was revoking Israel's use of the land as discipline. It's like, you didn't do what you were supposed to do, so now I'm taking it away from you. The Israelites were told that they were to grant the Canaanites no terms and give them no mercy. They are not to intermarry, because that's the easiest way for you to start going down that path. It means that Israel did not do what they've always done and allow a king to remain in return for taxes or tribute. It's like, okay, we've conquered you, but you give us a little bit of money, we'll let you stay. God specifically said, don't do that. Don't give any mercy. Get them all out. So Canaanites who refuse the God of Israel are not to remain in the land. Now, they can just accept God and start to live that way and change everything, or they got to go. So verse 12 gives more reasons for Israel to be obedient. The women will be fertile. Israel's population will blossom. The soil will produce. The animals will thrive. Disease and pestilence will not be allowed to injure the Hebrews. The Lord will cause Israel to be victorious so long as the warriors show no pity. As long as you do it the way I said, it'll all work out. So verse 17, Moses addresses what he and the people are thinking. He saw the same thing 38 years ago, before, when they were like 11, 12 days away from the promised land. People like the idea of having a land of their own, but they don't like having to fight for it. He tells Israel what God did in Egypt, he's going to do to the Canaanites, but you have to act. It's not about just, okay, I'm going to wait for God to give it to me, and then he'll call me with the address and I'll just move in. He didn't say that at all. He says we have to participate. So the victory will be so complete that not even the names of the kings and military leaders will be remembered. That's how unbelievable it will be. So Moses reminds them, don't take their idols because you will worship them. And don't take their gold and silver, because the desire for gold and silver is just as idolatrous as the idols. A lot of the idols were made out of gold and silver, so they would melt them down and then keep the gold and silver. And so it's a little like getting money from, like say a strip club. And it's like, well, that's ill-gotten gains, essentially, is kind of the way I look at it. So let's jump into chapter 8. And we'll also read that one from the New Living Translation for the same reasons. But let's go. Be careful to obey all the commands I'm giving you today. Then you will live and multiply, and you will enter and occupy the land the Lord swore to give your ancestors. Remember how the Lord your God led you through the wilderness for these 40 years, humbling you and testing you to prove your character, and to find out whether or not you would obey his commands. Yes, he humbled you by letting you go hungry and then feeding you with manna, a food previously unknown to you and your ancestors. He did it to teach you that people do not live by bread alone. Rather, we live by every word that comes from the mouth of the Lord. Or do we? Do we ignore a few of those words because we don't really like them? So for all these 40 years, your clothes didn't wear out and your feet didn't blister or swell. Think about it. Just as a parent disciplines a child, the Lord your God disciplines you for your own good. So obey the commands of the Lord your God by walking in his ways, and fearing him. For the Lord your God is bringing you into a good land of flowing streams and pools of water, with fountains and springs that gush out in the valleys and hills. It is a land of wheat and barley, of grapevines, fig trees, and pomegranates, of olive oil and honey. It is a land where food is plentiful and nothing is lacking. It is a land where iron is as common as stone and copper is abundant in the hills. When you have eaten your fill, be sure to praise the Lord your God for the good land he has given you. Imagine you've been out in the desert for 38 years and you're about to go into a place that has water and food and animals and abundance. It's complete opposite of where they've been. But that is the time to be careful. Beware that in your plenty you do not forget the Lord your God and disobey his commands, regulations, and decrees that I'm giving you today. For when you have become full and prosperous and have built fine homes to live in, and when your flocks and herds have become very large and your silver and gold have multiplied along with everything else, be careful. Do not become proud at that time and forget the Lord your God who rescued you from slavery in the land of Egypt. Do not forget that he led you through the great and terrifying wilderness with its poisonous snakes and scorpions, where it was so hot and dry. He gave you water from the rock. He fed you with manna in the wilderness, a food unknown to your ancestors. He did this to humble you and to test you for your own good. He did all of this so you would never say to yourself, I have achieved this wealth with my own strength and energy. Remember the Lord your God. He is the one who gives you power to be successful in order to fulfill the covenant he confirmed to your ancestors with an oath. But I assure you of this, if you ever forget the Lord your God and follow other gods, worshiping and bowing down to them, you will certainly be destroyed. Just as the Lord has destroyed other nations in your path, you also will be destroyed if you refuse to obey the Lord your God. So imagine, when the pilgrims and Columbus all came to America, they had to build everything. They had to create all of that stuff. He's taking them someplace where it's already there. There's houses, there's cities, there's water, there's animals, there's crops already growing. He's basically giving them an instant country, a nation they can live in. So Moses is continuing his sermon. He's pleading with them to remember who they are, who God is, and that obedience to his commands is the proper expression of love to Jehovah. So many believers think that accepting Yeshua, Jesus the Christ, the Messiah, is the last act of obedience that is expected of them. That's true of salvation, but it's not true when it comes to how we're supposed to live as saved people. Now remember that everyone that he's talking to right now are already redeemed. He already saved them. So if you're already saved, then he tells you how to live. So Jews are watching us Gentiles and Jewish believers in Yeshua. They're watching how we actually act. Is it really a way that I want to follow? I've said this before. A lot of Christians walk out of church with their head down. They're sad. They're mad. They're rude to uh, people in restaurants and stuff. And it's like, we should be the happiest people on the planet. We should be the most positive, optimistic people in the world. And a lot of times we're not. We're kind of nasty or rude or just mean. So Jesus says in Matthew 7:21, again, New Testament, not everyone who says to me, Lord, Lord, will enter the kingdom of heaven, but he who does the will of my Father who is in heaven. Many will say to me on that day, Lord, Lord, did we not prophesy in your name and in your name cast out demons and in your name perform many miracles? And then I will declare to them, I never knew you. Depart from me, you who practice lawlessness. To me, that's the scariest verse in the whole Bible. Is but God, what about me? I did all this stuff. I don't know you. Get away from me. So what lawlessness is Jesus referring to? He's talking about the biblical, universal, eternal laws of Jehovah, of God. He's saying things in different ways to make some important points, but he says, you who practice lawlessness, the Antichrist, the man of lawlessness. So anti-law is anti-Christ. So in other words, Israel's ability to stay in the promised land is conditional on Israel's obedience to the Lord's commands. That's what he's saying. If you want to stay and live in the milk and honey and abundance, this is how I want it done. So when the Bible says obedience to God, it means obedience to his written commands. What else is there to be obedient to? I hear people say, follow God's commands. Well, which ones? The ones in the Bible or somewhere else? Because I'm always told, well, those don't matter anymore. I don't know why we think they don't matter anymore, other than we just don't want to do them. But when Jesus and Moses and God say something, I think we should listen to it. That's my opinion. So that's chapter 8 of Deuteronomy. Next time we will cover chapter 9 because that's how numbers work. God bless. Love God, love people, and change the world.